has it been? Is it a deteriorating situation for us?
It's a hard situation, but I'm not going to agree that it's a deteriorating situation. We're in the middle of a long, hard counterinsurgency campaign. But those who say that everything's in a downward spiral or everything's deteriorating, I think we need to step back and say, well, what's been the conditions here in Afghanistan? This is a country that's been at war for 30 years. 30 years. 75% of the population in Afghanistan is under 30 years old. They have known nothing but violence their entire life. The polling data in this country shows that the people reject the insurgent militant groups. They're also dissatisfied. They don't feel their needs are being met, but they are supportive of international forces here to help with their security.
Well, is there an exit strategy, and if there is, what is it?
There's what I call a tipping point, and the tipping point is when we get to having built and supported the capacity and the capability in Afghanistan to provide for their own security with their army, their police, their intelligence organizations, provide for governance, where increasingly the international community can stand in the background, especially militarily, and then do more of a training and mentoring mission. Then when we get to that tipping point, then I think that means obviously that we can start to withdraw or reduce the military commitments in this country.
But as of the moment, we're in the process of increasing our military commitment.
We are.
Possibly doubling our troop strength in 2009. Is this or is it not to be seen as an Afghan version of the surge?
I don't use the term surge because I think it's going to be a sustained commitment for the next 3 or 4 years at least. And I say that because that's the program timeline that we want to use to increase the size and capability of the Afghan army and the Afghan police. So I don't see this as a temporary surge of additional forces. I see it as a sustained commitment for the next few years.
For the next few years, and I think you said maybe 3, 4, 5?
I have a hard time perhaps trying to predict. I have a hard time predicting next month, next week. But as I look to future plans, we have a plan to increase the size of the Afghan army and to reform and increase the policing capability in this country. But that's going to take. That's not a 6-month project. That's spread across the next 3 to 4 years. So I think we'll have to do a running assessment, and certainly after we get to that milestone, we'll have to ask the question, and it'll be bigger than me, but we'll have to ask the question, is this the big enough army or is this the big enough police for the country of Afghanistan?
Joe, I want to give you an opportunity to talk directly to the families of our young men and women in uniform, many of whom say, well, finally things in Iraq are reaching the point, for better or for worse, that we can see the day when our force will be out, and they were looking for more time with their service men and women at home. Then they pick up the paper and see Afghanistan is being reemphasized again. New troop deployments may be extending the time in country. What can you say to them? They have their hopes and dreams of things getting better, and you've talked about a long, tough, costly campaign here in Afghanistan.
But it's a campaign, Dan, that failure's not an option. The reason we sent military forces here after 9/11 is still here. Al-Qaeda is still here in this region. They still have global reach. There's still an element of insurgency that would allow the Taliban to establish training camps again in Afghanistan. And we don't want that to happen. That's in our vital national security interests. And I think that's why the United States, in a leadership role, needs to stay committed to this campaign in Afghanistan. Now, I would, and I appreciate your opportunity to let me say this, to the American people, to fathers and mothers and husbands and wives and loved ones who have their men and women serving over here in a very tough combat environment. We have never done this better. Our young sergeants and officers represent our country in a way that is absolutely respected by Afghans. It's appreciated by Afghans. They love Americans here, but it's a strain, it's a stress on our country. Believe me, I understand that.
But specifically to the families, you know, I mean, you have a military family. You've commanded men and women who have families for many years. Some of those families are saying to themselves, you know, I'm very proud our family's contributing, but we've contributed enough, and somebody somewhere has got to understand that we're stretched thin almost to the breaking point.
We are stretched, and I'd like to sit here and say I can see the light at the end of the tunnel and it's a year or two away. I can't say that. I don't know when that is. I do know that only through the leadership of the United States and the commitment of our most precious resource, our men and women, are we going to get to that point where we see the light at the end of this tunnel, of this long war.